Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Ben, and this is the Civil War tag. So this tag was created by Al over at Big Hard Books and Classics. I had seen him film this along with Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads. And these are all questions related to the Civil War. I guess that Al and Greg have been visiting some Civil War sites in Virginia, and this inspired the tag. So they did a fun video about it, and I thought, you know what, it's a subject that I love. I'm going to go ahead and do the tag as well. You can see I do have a little bit of a attire that is fitting. I don't have a proper Civil War shirt or anything like that, so I'm just wearing a regular polo shirt. But I got my Union kepi on. I also have next to me a antique Civil War Union light cavalry saber. So it's from the 1860 model. But yes, this is an actual antique sword from the Civil War. So love having this. It is one of my favorite time periods to learn about, to read about, to watch films about. I don't consider myself an expert at all in it, but it is something that I do like to research and enjoy. So anyhow, it's not a lot of prompts here, but some of them are about Civil War, I guess, reading habits, and the other ones are about opinions, because the Civil War is a subject that the United States, as a culture, as a society, is still in many ways dealing with. We did not, as a people, properly deal with the trauma of the Civil War and really what it meant and what it was about. And we are still feeling the effects of it today. So sometimes opinions will run very high. Now you can tell, hopefully by the kepi I'm wearing, which team I belong to. So that will certainly, excuse me, color some of the answers that I give here. So anyhow, let's begin. The first one, what is your favorite Civil War novel? I've only read a few. I haven't read too many. I'd say my favorite is not going to be a surprise. The Killer Angels by Michael Shara, his novel about the Battle of Gettysburg. I was already interested in the Civil War by the time I was a teenager, but this is the one that I think really got me more into it. I remember reading this and just consuming it and really loving it in the back seat of my parents' car as we were driving, basically to and from vacation. We had actually taken vacations to Gettysburg and Pennsylvania and seen some Civil War sites. I don't think we were going that time. We might have been going down to Virginia or South Carolina possibly. But I remember having this in the backseat of the car, this actual copy, and just loving it and reading and absorbing it. I had seen the film Gettysburg at that point, so there was a lot that I had known about it. I knew, I guess, what to expect. But this one, it does a great job. I mean, I think you can nitpick the history, of course, that's in here. But it does a great job of humanizing these real people. And, introduced a whole generation of people to people like Joshua Chamberlain and some really fascinating characters. That's the thing about the Civil War, is that it is just filled with interesting people and people with epic facial hair. That's why I think my beard is fitting today. A lot of great beards and mustaches during this time. This is probably my favorite, although there are some others that I really like. I have a pretty nice copy, I think, of Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. This is an American classic, and this happens to be a nice edition. Essentially about somebody finding out what war is really like, and how horrific it is, learning the hard way, something like that. And that reminds me of another thing that I just finished reading, and that is the Civil War stories of Ambrose Bierce. So I have here the Library of America collection. It's The Devil's Dictionary, Tales and Memoirs. And in here there is In the Midst of Life, Tales of Citizens and Soldiers. And I've been reading this over the past week or so, and I've been loving these short stories. Some of them are horror, some of them are satirical. But essentially, Ambrose Bierce was a Civil War veteran. He was in some of the worst battles in the Civil War. He saw it firsthand. And afterwards, he wrote many things. He was a journalist. He wrote a lot of satire, a lot of humor. But he also wrote short stories, and many of them dealt with Civil War memory and the horrors of war. And when he writes about something like the paranoia one feels, or what it's like to come across a body, you can read that from many writers, but you know that he saw it, right? He knows what it looks like when a body's been sitting there for a week, and all the different trauma that bodies can suffer due to various types of, whether it be weaponry or falls or certain objects. It brings a certain gravity to it all. His most famous story, undoubtedly, is an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge about a Confederate spy who's being hanged. So you might be familiar with that, but I would definitely recommend checking out some of his stories. I will make a video about this pretty soon because I've read through, I'm actually further along than what this would suggest because I've been bouncing around in the book, but I'm not too far away from finishing this, and I really liked it. So anyhow, I've read some other things that were also Civil War fiction, but those are my top 3 at this point. Number 2, what is your favorite Civil War nonfiction? Again, there's a lot of really good stuff out there. I think Al, in his video, said The Fiery Trial by Eric Foner, which I think is an excellent biography of Abraham Lincoln. It's not exactly a biography, it's more like a biography of Abraham Lincoln's thoughts about slavery and about the future of African Americans, and how those ideas evolved over the course of the Civil War. Lincoln was very much somebody who had an open mind, and it's very apparent if you follow his track. It's very common for people to take Lincoln's quotes out of context, or take something that he said in a political realm, to a certain newspaper in 1860, which doesn't necessarily reflect the way that he ended up thinking in 1865. So I think that's a great one. But my favorite, I think, would be this Republic of Suffering, Death in the American Civil War by Drew Gilpin Faust. This is a social, cultural history about what American culture went through by having so many dead. We're talking over 650,000 people dead. And this was a time period where death was, there was something thought of as like the good death, to die in your bed surrounded by loved ones. There was a whole process and parade basically of mourning during the Victorian era. And what do you do then when you have thousands of men dying and you have to bury them as fast as you can, or the pigs are dragging them out from the graves, the shallow graves that are there. Some of them never get buried. They had to really change their perception of what death was, and what it meant, and how things like spiritualism tie in, and ideas of the afterlife, and embalming, and it goes through all that, and what a traumatic, shocking time this was for Americans to really kind of confront the nature of death and redefine really what it meant for them. So I think this is just an excellent book. It's something that hits a lot of boxes that I'm interested in. So this would probably be my favorite nonfiction Civil War book. 3, what state do you live in? Connecticut. Born and raised, been a damn Yankee my whole life. Number 4, did you ever own a Confederate Rebel flag? No, I never did, and no, I'd never care to. It's something that in Connecticut you can see sometimes, especially people who are, I think that they think that they're celebrating like a kind of a blue collar existence. You don't see it as much anymore, but even like 10 years ago, you might have seen it on bumper stickers of people's cars. I think that people are becoming much more conscious to really what that flag meant, what it represented, and its true nature, as far as I'm concerned. And of course, I grew up with my father loved Southern rock when I was growing up, so I think he had maybe still does, a very romanticized vision of the rebel flag. So it's something that I certainly came across a lot when I was younger. But no, it's not something that I would really even tolerate in my household. It's a flag of white supremacy and basically insurrection, as far as I'm concerned. Again, I said that I'm very much a part of a certain team when it comes to the memories of this conflict and how it's discussed. And that goes to the next one. How do you feel about Confederate statues and memorabilia? And especially, I think what they mean is the supposed controversy of them coming down. There are certainly many people who are against it, but I think it's a good idea to take a lot of these statues down. Um, you'll hear people argue that you're erasing history. You're definitely not. Uh, these figures are still going to be spoken of in history books. These statues themselves were not put up just to teach people about history. They have a history of their own. What's fascinating about the Civil War is that the North won the war, but the South won the narrative, at least for the 100 years afterwards. So this is where we get things like the Lost Cause. We get the Daughters of the Confederacy really controlling how the war was remembered in a lot of ways. Slavery in history books up until like around the 1960s would almost never mention slavery. You had things like The Birth of a Nation, the D.W. Griffith film, showing Reconstruction in a way that shows African Americans, newly freed slaves, basically assaulting white women, and the Ku Klux Klan coming in to save the day. And you have at the same time the President of the United States praising a film like that for being wonderful history. You have the memory of things like Gone with the Wind, showing the old Confederacy as this kind of romantic idea of like it's like chivalrous, and man, isn't it how terrible it is that this is gone, that we've lost this. We there's a lot of baggage that comes with discussing this topic, and a lot of miscommunication that has happened over a century's time from after the Civil War fell. And those statues and the memorabilia that's around, that's all connected to that. I mean, those statues were generally put up not just to praise Confederate generals, but really to send a message to the people of the time, whether it's the late 1800s, or the early 20th century, of who was in charge and who should be intimidated, right? To send a message to the African Americans who were in that section about, okay, the South lost the war, but they're still in charge. So those absolutely have a history of their own that has to be acknowledged. I don't think you have to destroy the statues. I think you can put them somewhere in a proper place and give them their own historical context as like a museum piece. But they don't any longer represent, I think, the majority of Americans in American culture, because these public statues are supposed to represent what we value. And I don't think we value white supremacy, I hope. At least the people who are, living around those statues, I hope they're not valuing that. I hope they're not valuing intimidating the African American population. I certainly hope that they're not valuing raising arms against the United States. So I say no, we can definitely take those statues down and replace them with things that are more befitting to our values. Whatever goes up there should deserve to go up. But I think these things have been up there long enough. This kind of goes into, there was a bonus question that Greg's wife, she was reading them the questions in that video. She had a bonus question that she asked. She said, how do you feel about the renaming of ships and military bases that are named after Confederate generals? And same kind of thing. As far as I'm concerned, these Confederate generals, many of whom were in the United States military, they betrayed their oaths to protect and to serve the United States. They took up arms against it. They committed treason. And why did they do it? I mean, don't believe the states' rights thing. That is something that came later. They were not talking like that during the Civil War. This is where, books like, still have it over here. This is where books like The Killer Angels can be a little bit outdated and misleading. They weren't talking about their states' rights. They were talking about slavery. I mean, that's the states said why they separated, why they seceded. They were very clear about it. So it was to protect slavery and white supremacy. And that's why these men took up arms against the United States. So I don't think that they are deserving of, having bases named after them. And I understand that a lot of people will talk about their heritage. It's heritage, not hate, etc., etc. listen, I've got ancestors too. You know, some of which, from what I understand, were mafia and everything like that. Just because they were my ancestors doesn't mean I have to celebrate them or praise them or be proud of what they did. You know, it's in the past. It's been over 150 years now. We can see them for what they are. So anyhow, that is those are my answers to the Civil War tag. You know, I guess what I say could be controversial to some people, but I don't think so. I think it's backed up pretty solidly by history. They do have sort of a caveat in here that if somebody is watching this and they want to do it and they are from outside the United States, they can modify their questions to the civil wars in their own countries. So with that in mind, I am going to tag actually my co-hosts for Historathon 2023. Historathon 2023 is a year-long celebration where we are reading and discussing and really bringing more attention to nonfiction history. We have split the year up into 4 quarters, each quarter looking at a different time period. We're currently in the 4th quarter, which looks at 1820 to the present, which fits with the American Civil War. Now, not all of my co-hosts are Americans. We've got Canadian, Mexican, British, so, you know, I don't expect them to all be caught up on the American Civil War. So if they choose to do this tag, they can do the American Civil War, or they can do, you know, Civil War conflicts of their own countries. Although Canada didn't really have much of one, but, you know, who knows? I don't know if Fred from Read by Fred will be able to talk about this within the context of Canadian history. But, you know, he's close enough to the United States. Maybe he's read something. They're not obligated to do it, but if they choose to do it, they are certainly welcome to. And their links will all be down below. So thank you to Al for creating this, and for both him and Greg for making the video. And yeah, as always, thank you, BookTube.